Hey everyone, this is Daniel with Screen Repair Business Academy, and I'm here to show you how to fix a Galaxy S21 FE. I want you to know that screen repair is easy. Building a business takes systems. I'll show you how to fix phones for free. Contact me if you want to build a $10,000 a month screen repair business. All right, we are ready to rock and roll. Okay, so first thing you're doing when you repair a Galaxy S21 FE, obviously you're taking the case off the phone. We got a customer with screen breakage right here. He's already got the phone turned off. Now, there's a lot of times when you get into a phone repair that the customer doesn't turn the phone off, and it's not always a possibility. So what you need to do in that situation is you need to talk to the customer, or if you can't get the phone turned off, you need to get the phone open and unplugged as fast as possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to open it up. We're going to start off with adding a little heat right here. Now, I believe the back of this is a glass back on it. I may be wrong, but I believe it has I may be wrong, but I think it has a plastic back. You want to be careful because Samsung phones are deceptive in that sometimes, in my opinion, the backs that are made of glass can feel like plastic. But the fan edition phones were meant to be a little bit more cost effective, so a lot of times they put plastic backs on them. I used a chisel blade to get into the back of this. I'm going to stick it under like this. I've never actually opened this up before, but it was just that easy to get a blade in there like so. You only want to go fractionally in there because a blade can cut things. Next, you're going to switch to using one of these guitar picks. Stick the guitar pick under the edge right there, remove the blade so you don't cut things, and Bob's your uncle. Next, I use syringes filled with Everclear alcohol. I'm going to shoot the syringe filled with Everclear alcohol in and around here. It doesn't react that strongly with electronics, evaporates quickly, it doesn't rust. It's the perfect solution because it also causes adhesive to come loose. Sometimes you can actually reuse adhesive that comes with it, that comes loose with it. So work all the way around, and that's how easy it was to open a Galaxy S21 FE. Okay, next we're going to remove all these screws. You get the blessing of this probably is going to be a high-speed part, which you don't have to watch me do the whole thing. The one thing I want you to remember, though, is on a lot of these Samsung phones, all of these screws are identical, so you don't have to worry about building yourself a grid because most of the main screws, you can just put in basically a pile over here. The only screws you have to pay attention to that are different on this phone are these screws right here. These are different, and they're probably a different size, so I'm going to set these aside to make sure I know which is which. Despite the fact that most times Samsung phones have identical screws going all the way through here, you probably want to make yourself a grid. To whatever extent you're relatively new to getting into phone repair, make yourself a grid, the shape of the phone right here, so you can always keep track of where your screws are. Because, well, if you lose track of where your screws belong, well, you're screwed. Well, actually, you're not screwed. You can always find out where the parts go with persistence, but you just don't want to have to take that time if you don't have to. All right. Almost done. Sometimes I've gone back and forth between using electrical screwdrivers, which love to die so fast, and using my hands, which can be done, I can do it just as fast. I suppose if I did back-to-back phone repairs all day long, that would be one thing to get this done, but I don't, so it doesn't matter too much to me. Okay. So what's common in pretty much all Samsung phone repairs is you take the back off the phone and then you take a layer of plastic middle pieces that holds the motherboard and everything off. You notice this one screw refused to come out. That doesn't always happen, but sometimes screws just want to stay in there. I think it's going to come out eventually. See, came out. You're going to gently lift this up, and you want to see all these plugs that are plugged in. We're going to get them all unplugged. Most importantly, we're going to go for the battery plug, which is right here, which is usually a small orange plug. I'm going to go with that one. But for good measure, I'm going to work my way through unplugging these connectors with my fingernail. Now, you want to use your fingernail. You never want to use something conductive like a piece of metal, both because it's conductive and you could short out the repair, but also because it's damaging. A piece of metal could cause something to pop off the circuit board, and then you're shipping this away or having to do micro soldering. Next, you're going to get this plastic piece popped off from down here, and there you go. It's done. Now, at this point, you need to figure out what you're doing, because one thing you can do is you can just remove this screen right here, take this off, and you'll have to go through and unplug it right here, and you can just remove the screen. It turns out that the screen I have to install this in comes with a frame. Sometimes it's cheaper to do that. One advantage of buying a screen pre-installed on a frame is they install it better at the factory. It's more durable. Sometimes inexperienced, and I've done this before, sometimes inexperienced people will not put enough adhesive around the perimeter of the screen, and that will allow the screen to come off, and that's the most embarrassing warranty replacement you'll ever have, is when a customer brings a phone back and says, "Hey, my screen's falling off." Back to the phone. Okay, since we're going to be swapping all the guts of this out, now we need to look at loosening up the motherboards. Beneath the plastic layer, a lot of times on Samsung phones, they'll have additional screws holding the motherboard in place. So we're going to pop the screws out. One. Yeah, make sure you don't strip a screw. If you ever start to strip a screw or feel like your screwdriver is moving in the screw as fast as possible, you want to press down really hard to try to keep the screwdriver from spinning. If that doesn't work and the screw still doesn't move, switch up to a different screwdriver. Try a bigger screwdriver, and that can help. Because if you strip a screw out, especially on this small scale, it can be hard to replace. Next, we're going to go down here. And we're going to remove all the cabling. We're going to be very careful with this because you can break these cables, but we're also going to keep an eye on just kind of the order that they're in. So it makes it easier for us to replace them. I'm going to take a phone call just a second. Hey, this is Daniel with iValue Repair. How can I help you? Okay. You can't hear anybody on the other end. Can you hear anyone on speakerphone mode? Or up by your ear? Okay. Unfortunately, that's a common iPhone 7 issue, and it's not really going to be fixable. I'm sorry. You're welcome. Bye. All right, let's go. So, unscrew the screws down here, unscrew the screws up here. Next, especially since we're taking out this motherboard, we need to find out where the SIM card tray is. See, and the SIM card tray is right here. We're going to pop that out. Because sometimes the SIM card tray will hold this in. Oh, this thing fell off. I'm not even sure where this goes. I think that goes to this right here. Okay, so next we're gonna get this fingerprint reader out. Being very careful to very gently leverage it out. It's not wanting to move too easily. I don't like that. I want to be careful. Next we're going to remove this lower board, especially since we've taken the SIM card out. And we're going to carefully remove this board. Since there's nothing under it, I'm going to start the process of directly transferring to save time. So I'm directly transferring this over into the new one and popping this fingerprint reader straight on in. Okay. Next up, we're going to start turning our attention to the battery. What you're going to do to get the battery out, my favorite thing to do, take a syringe full of alcohol, We're going to shoot the alcohol down in the bottom and up on the top and down the side. And instead of fighting the battery a ton, we're just going to let that sit there and go to work. Next, I'm going to go over here, and I'm actually going to use a little bit of alcohol for me right here to help get this thing loose. Now that that's done, I'm going to pull up on it. And we've got one of the 5G antennas loose. I'm going to let that dry out a little bit before reinstalling it. We're going to go up here. We need to make sure this connector is loose. We don't need to disconnect the cameras because they're mounted to the motherboard, so we don't have to disconnect those. We are going to disconnect the front-facing camera, though, and move that over here and disconnect this 5G antenna from up here. Now, so that I don't break that cable, we're going to remove this 5G antenna as well. Got to be really careful. This is weak stuff. Okay, so we've got all the connections loose, and hopefully we'll be able to just gently pop this motherboard out. And again, you're not forcing anything. If it pushes back on you at all, then you need to be then you need to back off. Okay. So this has given me some resistance, and one of the reasons it's given me resistance is because these cameras each have a little pocket of their own, and so they don't want to move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently pop each one of these cameras out so they can move more freely. There we go. And last but not least, there we go. Okay, so the cameras are ready to move. Make sure I haven't disconnected any of the cameras. Those are good to go. We're not going to transfer this over yet because we need to get the vibrator motor out. I'm going to hit that with, you guessed it, alcohol. And we'll try to get underneath it. It's already moving around a bit. I like that. And we are out. Heating this up real quick. Briefly so I don't burn my fingers. And sliding it right into the other spot for the motor. Now, especially with any frame, as with any frame transfer, what you're doing right now is you need to check to make sure there's no other parts you need to transfer over. This is replicated here, looking through here, looking through here, looking through here. There's no other parts left that we need to transfer over. So now we can begin installation. I'm going to install this and then we'll get the battery. This is installed. Let me pop the, gotta make sure those are all popping into where they're supposed to go. Let's pop the front facing camera in. That's in. We're gonna pop the one of the 5G antennas in place. Having a little bit of issue with the depth of this. Let's see. I think I actually may need to use a grinder. Okay. So, sometimes, and hopefully this is something you rarely have to do, but sometimes the this is not deep enough, so we need to grind it out a little bit. And I've got a special tool for doing that. Hello, this is Daniel with iValue. Can I help you? Hello, this is Daniel with iValue. Can I help you? Okay, just a second. All right. Highly don't recommend what I'm doing right now. As much as is possible, you want to get a phone that's already good to go. But sometimes you have to do a little bit of grinding. All right, here we go. This antenna is in place. This is plugged in like so. Okay, this has been soaking for a while with the alcohol, so we're gonna pop it up. You're gently. You don't want to pry too hard. You don't want to deform the battery. And most of all, you don't want to cut into the battery. Notice I'm using a blunt tool to get into this. But as you lift up, the alcohol is going to seep further under adhesive. Sometimes you can add a little more to encourage the process. Samsung and iPhone phones are usually pretty friendly they're pretty removal friendly. The phones are really difficult. I'm not pulling it out as much as I'm pulling on it and waiting for the adhesive to give away. Like I said, Samsung phones and iPhones, I use the same tactic, using alcohol to remove a battery. With Motorola phones, I still use alcohol, but I have to use alcohol and a sparing amount of heat. Obviously, you don't want to heat up a battery too much because explosions can happen, but a little bit of heat helps to get the alcohol out. I've already applied tape in here, so I'm just going to slap this battery in. We're not going to we're not going to connect it yet because we don't have the rest of the pieces in place. I'm going to reassemble my lower 5G antenna. That antenna does not want to be connected, does it? Well, that's interesting. That antenna entirely fell apart. This antenna, that's not good, but the antenna ripped itself off. It fell apart. So sometimes these things will happen, and it's not necessarily your fault, but I'm going to have to take ownership and talk to the customer because he's going to have to bring this back, and we'll replace that for him. So let's connect all these connectors. This is an example of why you need to be careful when you're doing, when you're disconnecting wires and things, because if you're not careful, you can cause the connection that's soldered onto your board to come loose. And unless you got a micro soldering setup, that means you need to replace the part. The good news in this situation is I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be able to buy that for a couple bucks. If this was on either the motherboard, you got to get that. If it was on this motherboard, you're going to have to get that shipped out and replaced. I'm going to hit this with a little bit of air to make sure that I didn't leave any metal particles on here, because that would stink. Okay, connections. You're testing all your connections for flatness and make sure they're all popped in. There's one more connector right here, and that is part of our wireless charging. But before I put this on, I need to screw on our black screws. I believe one of my black screws, if you're ever confused as to where the black screws go, then you can just do a check by comparing this and the holes in this against that, and you figure out where your lower screws goes. Also, sometimes your lower screws will have those metal rings around them, reinforcing, whereas the pass-through screws won't. Alright, we are almost, believe it or not, coming to the wrap-up side of this. Okay. This is so crazy. I've not had one of these come off like this in a while. It's disconnected and it needs to be replaced. Okay, that's on, that's on. I'm going to reinstall the SIM card. That's on. We're going to snap this back in, flip this up, and this connector goes to the 5G antenna that broke. This connector goes to wireless charging, and this one finally goes to the battery. If we can get that one connected right, this phone should work. 1, 2, all right, all my connections are good to go. Before sealing this up with adhesive, the most important thing we're going to be checking is making sure this turns on. But before I do that, what I'm going to do is put at least a couple screws in here, because some of these connections for buttons and stuff are made by pressure, and they expect the phone to be held together to complete the connection. So before testing it, you always want to screw in at least a few of these screws to make sure the pressure is on. Okay, I've got several screws. I'm going to replace these screws as well so that I have them for when we get the replacement. Actually, a lot of times this is designed to actually not have screws, so we're not going to put screws right there just yet. So I'm going to grab a power connection and test our handiwork. I'm going to wait a minute for this to power on and give this just a minute to come on. And frustratingly, it doesn't appear like this is working. So there's a couple things I can test right now. It might be this is a bad screen. That'd be really high on the frustration list. We're going to start by disconnecting the battery. And then what we're going to do is to make sure that we've checked all of our connections. I'm going to disconnect that. And then I'm going to reconnect the screen connection. And I'm going to reconnect the screen connection up here. Because I want to make darn sure. Interesting. The connector up here doesn't look good either. So my connector looks kind of weird. Unfortunately, my screen connector is looking weird, so we'll see what happens. So I found a problem. We'll see what happens. That connection does not look good. So we're going to plug everything back in. We're going to put this back on. We're going to put the pressure screws back in place. We're going to power this on and hope for the best. So our screen is not working, frustratingly. It is not working. I guess you have some troubleshooting to do. And I think probably is a place where I should probably end this call. End this this connection. So I will talk to you guys more later. I want to wrap this up and share this because even problem repairs can be instructive. So here we go. Most of the time when you get to the point that I got, the screen will come on and it'll work. Most of the time you won't break connectors off the motherboard or off the 5G antenna. What happened with this one, because both this connector was broken and the motherboard connector was broken, and I know that I was careful, was that I believe the damage that caused these connectors to fail. So I looked up the value of this phone, and this phone was valued around $240. The price of this repair was $205. So I called the customer up and I said, hey, if you're going to repair the motherboard, it's going to be another $110. Now, in some situations, if I feel like it's my fault, then I'll offer to pay that. In this case, and I don't think it was my fault, I think it was just a bad screen. So the lady is going to just pay me $40 for my labor. I put everything back in the old phone, and we're going to hand it back to her. Now, To kind of wrap it up, in a normal situation, these Samsung phones are super straightforward to repair. And all you'd have to do to wrap the repair up once you got the screen to power on would be to put all the screws back on. You'd have to replace this adhesive. You have to pull this adhesive off. And then I'd recommend using a Tessa tape. I only buy Tessa tape for my Fix-It because they're the only ones that have the good stuff. I'd use Tessa tape, run it all the way around here, and then put this close, and you would have a fixed phone. You'd have to put clamps on here to hold it shut, and the phone would be fixed. As it is right now, this one's still broken. I'm giving it back to the customer and taking $40 payment. So the reality is that phone repairs most of the time will go better than that. The repair that I did on the S21 FE, it turned out that there were damages there that we decided not to fix. I still made $40 for that repair, but the customer didn't get a fixed phone. Sometimes customers handle that well, sometimes they don't. Sometimes, on the other hand, you're going to make mistakes where you break a customer's phone and it's your fault. The best thing you can do in that situation is to own up to what happened. And if you own up to what happened when it really is your fault, then you can win a customer over by offering to pay for the damages or offering to replace the phone. There's a lot of options you have in that situations. But whatever the case, I need you to remember that most of the time phone repair is easy, but building a business takes systems. If you want to learn how to repair phones, keep watching my channel. If you want to learn how to build a business, shoot me a message. I'll show you how. Have a wonderful day.